We bring in Will West from the Sports Animal, 3 to 7. He's fantastic. Last time we were on this show, Will, all heck was breaking loose.
It was. I know. So it was nice that people responded to this show with their statements of it wasn't us, but so and I still don't know who leaked out that original On3 report. I know, and here's the thing. You get it from people who should know, but then you also, in these types of situations, have to worry about who has an agenda that they want spread out there because maybe people have beef with Spire independent of the situation. And so I still don't know exactly what happened. I know what a lot of people are saying. People who said Spire leaked it at first. The Spire says they didn't leak it. And at the end of the day, it kind of is what it is.
It is. My hunch is, and then we're going to get to some specific topics. My hunch is somebody actually within the football department leaked it. I may be in the minority there. I've just got a feeling they were a little sick of it, thought they could force a hand. I would think that Spire Sports would know enough about PR not to force that hand because that was the exact wrong play to make. But I could be wrong.
Yeah, and I want to tell you that's why they're all the other stuff is PR spin, and Tennessee's super good at it, and Nico's camp super bad at it. So we're all watching that play out real time over the last week too. The reason they left was because of the On3 report. Everybody got in a big urinating contest. Nico and his family, ghosted. And depending on who you talk to, Nico called Joey Halsey, or he didn't call Joey Halsey, or he called Joey Halsey too late. The only two people I know that know both Nico's camp and Tennessee's side both said, look, if it was Nico, he'd have called Joey Halsey. They're all tight. And he's a respectful kid. Big Nick would absolutely just leave and ghost and say we're out. And so that's kind of and I understand both sides of that, but I would say, look, just point blank, if that On3 report doesn't come out and whoever leaked it, none of this happens. Nico's still Tennessee's QB. Tennessee still has a QB, and none of this happens. And Big Nick would be a problem behind the scenes, and he's somebody else's problem. And honestly, Heupel wouldn't deal with him a lot, and Denny White wouldn't deal with him a lot, and Alicia wouldn't deal with him a lot, and nobody on that side of things would deal with him. It'd be the people in the stadium and stuff like that just deal with the annoyance of him. But that's it. I mean, that's what happened is hurt feelings, and we are where we are.
You mentioned Halsey's name. Let's zero in on that for a second. Because when Nico signed with Tennessee, he had an Alex Golesh that proved he could put an incredible offense on the field in 2022. That turned Hendon Hooker into an NFL prospect. He may never play, but he is an NFL prospect. Jalen Hyatt into an NFL prospect, which I wouldn't have thought would have been the case before 2022, but he did do that. So my question is, with the change from Golesh to Halsey a couple of years ago, is it anywhere close to the mark based off what you've heard, what I've been told, and I'll share my thoughts with you, that Nico left partly because he didn't trust Joey Halsey to get him ready for the NFL? Is that a fair or unfair statement?
That is an accurate statement. And so that's part of it. Like, I think the other side of it is they wanted more help too. Because, like, why didn't you go get one more offensive lineman? Why didn't you get one more receiver? Those of us close to it, we can look at it. I mean, we've all done this a bit. It's Tennessee. The winter window is when you go get new players. The spring window is when you re-up your guys. And then Boo Carter wants more money. And then Mike Matthews wants more money. And then you had to pay David Sanders $700,000 more than anybody else was going to pay David Sanders. And all of a sudden, you don't have the same level of money. So I do think Tennessee had planned to be active in the spring window, and they just were on like a reverse schedule because of the dudes who, Ricky Gibson, the dudes who needed more money now, or they were going to leave in the window. Tennessee kind of got flip-flopped on which window was when they were doing what. It's not unfair. So the one thing the family has always said is that that we wanted help. They have said since it's the system, and I believe that. I believe they believe that. It doesn't mean the system's the problem. But at the end of the day, I think the system, and again, it's not Josh Heupel's system, and Josh Heupel's system's an evolved version of the Art Briles system. And it's the Art Briles system has never made a starting quarterback in the NFL. It hasn't. Now it gets guys drafted, and they have a look at it. And so I would say you knew what the system was when you got here, dude. But I do think there's a question about whether Joey Halsey, I can tell you I feel very comfortable saying that I know The family did not trust Joey Halzle to get Nico ready, whether they're right or wrong.
All right. Today's tough question. Let's dive into that. And then if you can follow up, Caleb, with some thoughts on Halzle, because I want to focus on that mainly. But before the end of this segment, I want to get the blame pie, so to speak, as Will sees it. Today's tough question brought to you by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com.
Today's tough question. Boom. You heard that. Now take it. The Dave Hooker Show with Caleb Calhoun. Represented by T. Scott Jones, banksandjones.com, Tennessee's trial attorney.
All right, Caleb. So jump in there. We'll play a little blame pie, but let's focus on Halzle for a moment, if we can.
Okay. I'll do blame pie and I'll focus on Halzle, but well, I mean, I just have to ask this question because look, I have to be honest, because what you're telling me, I'm not saying is wrong. I totally believe you, and I totally believe everybody that's reported that. But the thing that's hard for me is the Nico team not saying this publicly until yesterday. What is it, like 5 days after this all blew up in everybody's face and the reports were out there that it was about money? They let that report sit for like 5 days that they left over money, basically. And then they come to Front Office Sports and say it was about the system. And if it's about the offense and about the system, and if it's about Joey Halzle specifically, why would they then transfer to a school with a first-year offensive coordinator who's never called a play in his life and a head coach who himself was never a coordinator before he was a head coach? I mean, they may not like this system, but didn't they go to a school that literally has no offensive system at that point?
Well, they're going to run a modified, like what Saban ran at Alabama is what they're going to run. The Sark system. It's it's Kurt Signetti, what they did. There was a modified version of the Sark system. That's what they're going to run. They believe, and again, just because somebody's stupid doesn't mean they're lying. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So I believe that they believe it, if that makes sense. So, and I will tell you without question, I know the family has told people, Nico has told people that the family didn't trust Joey Halzle to get him ready. And they didn't trust the system, and they wanted the system changed. Now, that alone would be enough that I would say that, and also just because you say it doesn't mean, and you shouldn't have said it, doesn't mean it's not true. That system we watched last year, people going to the 3 safety shell, they didn't have a lot of answers, right? Especially in the passing game. And so I think the system needs to be evolved. I think Jeff Levy's already shown us how you can evolve that system when he was at Ole Miss, by putting it in the pistol, by rolling guys out and getting some waggle, by levels concepts, things like that. And so I think you bring in Seth Littrell to evolve that system the way that Seth Littrell did and Jeff Levy did. But I do think that they believed it, but just because they believe it doesn't mean it's accurate. But sometimes people just don't know what the heck they're talking about. So I will tell you, they have told people that they are friends with here that it was about the system and it was about not trusting Joey Halzle to have Nico ready for the NFL. I would counter with that by saying, is Josh Heupel's not John Calipari. His job's not to get Nico to the NFL and make him an NFL-ready quarterback. His job's to win games. And along that way, you also want to develop the quarterback. It ain't like what Josh Heupel and Joey Halzle did last year, and it didn't work. You went to the playoff. Nobody expected to go to the playoff. Outside of GBO, that was the only argument you could make for them going to the playoff. And the problem last year, part of the problem with the offense, I thought, was Nico. He wasn't ready. He was more ready than Arch was last year. He was more ready than Jackson Arnold was last year, guys from his class. But he still was clearly underdeveloped, and you can usually tell that. One thing, like I did a show with Bobby Scott for 18 years. That dude did, Bobby did a dozen years in the NFL, and he always pointed this out. If they throw in the middle of the field, they ain't ready. If that's where they're real comfortable, if they're not comfortable throwing outside, they're comfortable throwing in the middle of the field, they ain't ready. And there were times Chris Brazzell's one-on-one down the sideline, and everybody's like, oh, Chris Brazzell sucks. If Nico knows to throw the ball up to him when he sees him one-on-one breaking away and let Chris Brazzell go make a play, you don't have the problems with Chris Brazzell last year. Nico was a young quarterback who needed to be scot-free open like he was it in a game of freeze tag, or Nico wasn't going to throw him the ball. So all of these things to me, and that's the hard part, is I think the first takeification of sports, nobody, like, all of these things can be true at the same time, or people can believe it, even if those people are wrong. So that's kind of the way I look at all of this. Is I can tell you without question the family believed, Nico believed, Joey Halzle couldn't get him ready, and that the system was going to be a problem for them to get to the NFL.
Yeah, and I want to go to a comment here in the message board. Donnie says, "Bull stuff. If Nico got $4 million, he would still be here." Do you think that would have been the solve, SALVE, that would have kept him here and happy, because you are talking about getting to the point of being financially independent for the rest of your life, no matter what happens in the NFL.
I don't know. I will tell you, the family has said over and over again that's their side has said over and over again, it wasn't about the money. We wanted help. We wanted the system changes. At the same time, human nature, it makes it hard for me to believe, were they really okay with Nico making $1 million less than Lenore Sellers and DJ Lagway? Really? Right? Like, and did Tennessee say, we want you to play on your old contract, and you're the one quarterback in America that needs to play on a 3-year-old deal? Really? Did that happen? No, it did. Neither of those things happened. So human nature makes me think they were negotiating a deal, the demand and they would have gotten past the finish line. I don't know that 4 was the number that anybody expected to land on, but it's not an unreasonable ask right now. Again, Lagway's making 3.5, Sellers making 3.5, Nussmeier's making 3.5. But if you ask for 4 and land at 3.5, I think everybody's happy and you move on from there, or even at 3 and change. I get Tennessee maybe wanting. I think Tennessee struggled financially a lot more than they want anybody to believe when it comes to what their NIL situation is. And I don't know that they had 3.5, an extra $1 million for that. Or if they did, they didn't have the money to then bring the help Nico's team wanted. And so that's a little bit of a problem. But Nico's team has said repeatedly, we didn't ask for more money. I just find that impossible to believe, because that's not human nature. And also, that really seems to be a motivator for them. So why would they be okay with their kid making $1 million less than the rest of the SEC starting quarterbacks?
Great.
So, Will, to your point, and I want to zone in on this a little bit, because it's kind of a two-parter question here, but you talked about them not trusting Joey Halzle. I get that, because you talked about Jeff Lebby, who was actually, funny enough, Heupel's offensive coordinator at UCF for a while. Then there's Alex Golish. We talked about both of them have minds of their own, so they throw wrinkles in the offense, whereas Halzle just seems like a clone of like just doing whatever Heupel tells him to do, pretty much. But at the same time, I got to ask, didn't they kowtow to some of the demands from Nico's team just from we know they wanted more help. Well, they did go and add 2 offensive linemen in the winter portal. And you pointed out, they brought in Seth Littrell to tweak the offense. And didn't they install elements of the pistol in spring practice? So they're saying it was about the offense. Well, weren't they catering to Nico to a certain degree with that?
100%. And I wouldn't have done that, right? And I would have done whatever changes I need to win games. I wouldn't have done that. I mean, again, what got RG3 right out of the league? These plays are unacceptable. Door's right there. You know what I mean? No. You know what the system was when you got here. You don't want to be here. Don't. I think Tennessee was willing to do that to some extent, probably more than I would have been able to. Part of it's because I think Josh Heupel's he's smart, man. He knows, hey, okay, I've got to evolve my offense because Brent Venables broke it. So, he showed everybody how to stop that. So I have to have another wrinkle. I do think they did acquiesce, but part of it is I think they were already doing that to some extent. At the end of the day, I think this was a urinating contest. I think this was a high school breakup, not a dissolving of a business partnership. I think if that doesn't hit on 3, then Nico and the thing. Okay, let me just. I know your show, guys. I don't mean to do this, but I'm going to do this. Have you ever heard of a school that dissolved a relationship with a player that didn't say we dissolved a relationship with a player? Like if they dismissed Nico from the team, or any player's ever been dismissed from the team and it wasn't brought up that happened, Tennessee's not said that. They just said we're moving on. Which here's what I believe based on people I've talked to is Nico no calls, no shows to practice. Tennessee says, all right, it's over, because we've been asking him, are you going to re-up your contract or not? He couldn't give us an answer. Nico's team no called, no showed because they were going to transfer. And then Nico reached out later that day and said, I'm going to transfer. That's what I believe happened. And everything else is PR, and Tennessee's awesome at it. And Nico's camp's awful at it. And the rest is all just spin. But if Tennessee dismissed Nico from the team, they'd have said we dismissed Nico from the team. They didn't say those words. They just it went from we're moving on to now it's and I will say the things that have come out since Wednesday are the things that I think are actually true, which is we mutually agreed to part ways. And how they mutually agreed was Nico's camp ghosted and Tennessee said, oh, well, and we're good moving on. And then they leaked stuff out there or put a statement out through Chris Lowe and that burned the bridge completely up so that they couldn't come back.
I have an odd conspiracy theory that I threw out yesterday, but I want to get Will's take. Today's tough question brought to you by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com. Why Banks & Jones? Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks & Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks and Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks and Jones. T. Scott Jones. All right, Will, feel free to laugh at me. A lot of people made fun of me yesterday. But if I were, and the way you said it, moved on, I'm not 100% ruling out that Nico couldn't like things at UCLA, that the money's not there, that it's the same system, and he couldn't come crawling back to Tennessee.
I don't think you could now. I think Tennessee made sure they couldn't do that when they said that to Chris Lowe, because Chris Lowe's word's good as gold, right? So I think that when they put, like, everybody got mad at me because when the Lowe statement came out, a quote tweeted and said, "Oh my gosh, I've never seen a school nuke a kid like this." Like, that's not something you do. You guys have done this. We work under contracts. If my employer, and again, I don't necessarily have that big of a problem with Tennessee doing it. I'm not going to lie and act like it's not this. So one way or the other, I feel like we're beholden to the audience, not Tennessee, not Nico. So I'm going to try to the best of my ability, tell the truth. I've done 20 contract negotiations over the years. There was one years ago, if anybody remembers, long enough ago, I used to do work with another media outlet on top of the sports animal. And they wanted me to no longer go on anybody else's show besides the radio show. And I said, well, then you're going to have to pay me a retainer. So it gets kicked up to corporate. They said we spend 2 weeks arguing about it. We decide to part ways, and it doesn't. They're not going to come off the retainer, and I'm not going to say no. I'm not doing John Pennington's show without you giving me a retainer. So it's no big deal. Walked away. If they would have leaked out to the press something of we parted ways with Will West because he wanted a retainer and we didn't blink, I would have turned them into the SEC for some questionable accounting practices I knew about. I would go nuts. I have never, ever, under any circumstance, heard of any organization doing that in a contract negotiation, ever. Tennessee burned the bridge. They're not stupid. They knew they burned the bridge. And so I don't think there's a way to come back from this now by any stretch of the imagination.
Okay, something you go ahead, Caleb.
Sorry, I just want to wrap this up with one other thing too, though, because if we're talking about the offense, well, and we had Jimmy Hyams on Wednesday, and he brought up a point that I kind of am starting to agree with. I mean, in the 90s with Peyton Manning and Danny Werfel, we kind of got this idea of, David Cutcliffe developed Manning, where Steve Spurrier had Danny Werfel put up video game numbers, and that's why Peyton Manning was more ready for the NFL. But Hyams brought up, now, because you bring the offense and preparing people for the NFL, but the best quarterback in the NFL is Patrick Mahomes, who certainly did not play in an NFL pro-style offense in college. Isn't it much more now with how the NFL has evolved? Isn't it really just about how good you are, and it doesn't really matter how much the college offense developed you for the pros?
I agree. I completely agree with that. They're going to give you a shot. Now, you have to question why 2 years later, Hendon Hooker's coaches are still saying he's got to learn the offense, right? And Bryce Petty, the Bryce Petty situation, again, this isn't a Heupel thing. This is a Levy thing, or this is a Bryles thing. Bryce Petty gets drafted by the Jets, and second round pick, third round pick, something like that. And everybody in New York, I am a fan of Mike and the Mad Dog growing up, and I would work middays, and then I'd go pick my daughter up, and I'd stream Mike and the Mad Dog while I was driving to pick my daughter up and sitting in the school line. And all these Jets reporters are coming on saying, he's asking about Bryce Petty, like, he doesn't know how to play football. He knows how to play He knows how to play quarterback in that system. He does not know how to play quarterback as a whole. Now, think about this, though. Everyone said the same thing about Gus Malzahn. How many Gus Malzahn quarterbacks didn't work? Cam Newton worked. If you're good enough, you're good enough, at the end of the day. So do I think it's the ideal situation to tutor you for the pro as far as translatable skills? No. But if you're good enough, you're good enough at the end of the day.